Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Tales of Herding Gods based on novel. So let's start. Suddenly, a strange whistle could be heard. It was sharp, piercing through the space from 20,000 miles away. The dragons of all sizes that were sprinting with Qin Mu paused in their footsteps, slightly hesitant. The gold flood dragon under Qin Mu's feet also slowed down. It turned its body, thinking to run back in the direction of the whistle. Qin Mu immediately executed the golden flute and used it to control the golden dragon, but it wasn't moving at all. Qin Mu gritted his teeth and jumped off the dragon's back. He landed on the dragon Qilin and shouted, "Fatty dragon, go!" The dragon Qilin immediately rushed forward, and the whistle suddenly changed. The dragon Qilin also paused in his footsteps. The other flood dragons surrounded them, and it was obvious that Dragon Rearing Sovereign had used his whistle to control them. Even the dragon Qilin was ordered around and ready to attack Qin Mu. The flood dragons surrounded him so tightly that even a drop of water couldn't trickle through. They all raised their heads to look at him, but they didn't make a move. Suddenly, a flood dragon stretched out its long tongue to lick Qin Mu's stiff body, his palm to be exact. The whistling suddenly became fiercer, and from the sound of it, Qin Mu could well imagine that Dragon Rearing Sovereign was definitely furious. He was executing secrets of dragon control to urge the flood dragon to beat up Qin Mu. However, none of the flood dragons lay their claws on him. The whistle from Dragon Rearing Sovereign became even more urgent, but the flood dragon still didn't listen to its orders. Cold sweat rolled down Qin Mu's forehead, and he tried to move his shoulder. The dozen flood dragons surrounding him lowered their heads, and their dragon whiskers swayed around slightly. Mazu Sho. Strange dragon roars came from the mouths of the flood dragons as they became docile and obedient. Qin Mu was slightly stunned and lowered his head to take a look. He saw that the Emperor's disc had popped out from under his clothes, and it looked like an extremely fine dragon who had popped its head out and was leaning on his collar. Emperor's disc, the true Dragon Lord. Qin Mu came to an enlightenment. Dragon Rearing Sovereign's cultivation surpassed his by far, and his attainments in secrets of dragon control were also much higher. However, it had to be the effect of the Emperor's disc that the flood dragons didn't go under Dragon Rearing Sovereign's control. Qin Mu jumped onto the back of a flood dragon and shouted, "Collapse this dragon's vein for me." Dragon roars sounded out as over a dozen dragons trembled their bodies. They expanded drastically as they all revealed their true forms. In an instant, all kinds of savage and wild auras burst forth. Over a dozen flood dragons opened their mouths, and an incomparably terrifying throbbing sound exploded. Instantly, there was a world-shaking boom, and the dragon scales and stone walls of the dragon vein were destroyed. Crumbling walls collapsed, and the debris blocked off the entire passageway. The lava would then continue to rise higher and higher until it totally flooded the dragon's vein. Soon, the magma would completely fill up the passageway. Qin Mu shouted a command, and the group of flood dragons immediately went with him to rush out at a lightning-fast speed. Behind them, lava continued to pour down. The middle section of the dragon's vein had been ruined, so it would soon crumble in its entirety. In time, Qin Mu managed to rush out of the passageway and entered another dragon's vein before the previous one had completely crumbled. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. The ruined dragon's vein can block Dragon Rearing Sovereign off for a period of time, but not for long. He hurried the group of dragons to move forward through the dragon's vein, heading them toward Eternal Peace Empire through the underground. In Great White Mountain, numerous disciples of Great White Sword sect guarded the volcano closely. They had even brought the sect legacy treasure, which was 100 cases sword formation. There was 100 sword cases, each one 20 yards in length, surrounding the entrance of the volcano. 100 cases sword formation had quite a high reputation among the sword technique school. It was a precious treasure that the founding master of Great White Sword sect had left behind. Ever since the sect had been founded, the 100 sword cases were smelted every day in the volcano, thus their power grew stronger and stronger. They were like 100 huge and black stone tablets that were standing upright. The sword formation was ready to burst forth at any moment. On the mountaintop, snow fell continuously. Even though the place was a volcano, it was still very cold. Only the places near the mouth were warmer. A few disciples of the sword sect rubbed their hands to feel warm while they breathed out white vapors from their nostrils. A female disciple asked, "How does Heavenly Devil Cult Master, that old devil, knows that there's an unusual treasure in the mountains of our great white sword sect? We lived here so long, and we still didn't even discover anything, yet that old devil knew the moment he arrived." "How would I know?" The male disciple beside her leaned on a huge sword case to avoid the cold wind and shook his head. "However, the people of Heavenly Devil Cult are all very crafty, so they must have found about the treasure in our great white sword sect and thus came to take it. But they are underestimating our great white sword sect too much, not even greeting us at all, truly arrogant." An elder of the sword sect said, "Isn't the devil path always like that? What kind of person is this current Heavenly Devil Cult Master? He brought the emperor and imperial preceptor to the temple by killing his way through, then slew the crown prince in the emperor's face. So what else would he not dare to do? However, since sect leader has gone to the capital to submit an imperial appeal, we will definitely win. The treasure will belong to our great white sword sect. But now that sect leader isn't around, we need to buckle up and guard this place to prevent that old devil from bringing the treasure out and escaping." The numerous disciples that were stationed at the entrance of the volcano laughed. "Even though the treasure is below, there will definitely be numerous dangers. That old devil risks his life to find the treasure, not expecting that whatever he'll find will have to be handed over to us, the great white sword sect." Just as they were saying that, the volcano suddenly rumbled, and the elder of the sect immediately shouted loudly, "All disciples, the old devil is coming out, execute 100 cases sword formation to trap that old Davy." Ru. Dragon roars came from the volcano which suddenly erupted. Lava spurted out from its mouth and shot straight into the sky. Before everyone in Great White Sword Sect could execute the sword formation, they saw the entire peak exploding from the impact. The sword cases which were like black stone tablets flew out in all directions. Everyone was dumbstruck, not knowing what to do. They could only watch the lava spewing out from the volcano as Qin Mu brought out a dozen flood dragons. Disciples of Great White Sword Sect, quickly abandon the mountain and run for your lives. Qin Mu's voice came from above. "The big one is coming." "What big one?" Everyone in the sword sect was furious. An even more violent tremor came from the depths of the volcano, and Great White Mountain gave off loud splitting sounds as huge cracks spread through its body. Lava started to pour out from the cracks. The treasure of our Great White Sword Sect is actually so astonishing by just coming out from the ground. Nearly everyone in Great White Sword Sect was escaping off the mountain. However, the three elders didn't retreat and advanced toward the mouth of the volcano instead. They shouted, "Heavenly Devil Cult Master can't take the treasure in the mountain, so he's merely diverting our attention until he could. Everyone, don't run. This is the blessing of the founding master to strengthen our Great White Sword Sect, conferring the treasure in Great White Mountain to us. This is a sign that our Great White is going to prosper," another old woman cried out. "Heaven pitied us." A white-haired elder raised his head to the sky and let out a long sigh. He said loudly, "The founding master of our Great White Sword Sect said that this was a place where dragons prospered and we were bound to flourish and prosper with them, and the prophecy has indeed come true today. All disciples, listen up, today is the day when our Great White Sword Sect will prosper and surpass the three big sacred grounds. Come back and let us fight together to subdue this treasure." Numerous disciples of Great White Sword Sect heard his words and stopped immediately. They no longer ran, but turned back. Great White Sword Sect had never had many people. There was the sect leader who had gone to the capital to file an imperial appeal, and besides him, only 3 elders and over a dozen middle-ranking personnels were left behind on the mountain. They were all in charge of teaching the 100 disciples. At that moment, numerous people of the sword sect chose to stay behind and retrieved the sword cases that had been blown away. The black-colored sword cases thumped as they landed around Great White Mountain that was almost crumbling. The huge sword cases that were 20 yards tall opened up, and countless flying swords flew out like streams from a long river. In midair, Qin Mu stood on 2 dragons who exerted all their strength to sprint away. Numerous other dragons followed beside him and flew into the distance. Qin Mu turned back to take a look and saw flying swords transforming into clouds above Great White Mountain with their tips pointed downwards. All of them shot toward the volcano which was spewing lava. Qin Mu was dumbfounded. He immediately shouted, "Why aren't you guys running? Are you seeking death?" On the peak, the three elders sneered at him as one. "You want to lie to us to swallow the treasure by yourself?" Heavenly Devil Cult Master's heart is indeed so evil that it's frightening. If we didn't know Great White Mountain is a place where dragons prosper, we might have just been fooled by you. Qin Mu sighed and rushed away. Great White Mountain Range is built on the Dragon's Eye of the Dragon's Vein. However, this Dragon's Vein is merely the auxiliary Dragon's Vein of the true Dragon Lord. Not only is it not a place where dragons prosper, it's a place that seizes all fates there. Great White Sword Sect had their fate seized by the Dragon's Vein for so many years, so their time is probably up, Qin Mu thought to himself. Luckily there are only 100 people in this sword sect, so there won't be a huge disaster. Just as he thought that, Great White Mountain exploded with a bang. The huge volcano was shattered into pieces. The instant it happened, 100 cases sword formation crumbled and countless flying swords were melted in the sky, turning into molten iron. The disciples of Great White Sword Sect were also vaporized before they could even grunt in pain. The cultivation of the three elders was extremely high, but under such a terrifying power, it was completely useless. They vomited blood from the shockwave and stumbled backward, only to look at the flying swords which had turned into molten iron falling toward them at a speed that was even faster than before. Despair filled the elders' faces. The molten iron would pierce their bodies and put an end to their lives. Moments before it, they saw a behemoth rising from the debris of the collapsed Great White Mountain. As the Heavenly Devil Cult Master, he actually didn't lie to us. There's really a big one in the mountain. The three elders raised their heads to look at the god, which was incomparably sturdy. He gradually stood up, and two azure and scarlet dragons under his feet let out world-shaking roars. PSSH, PSSH, PSSH. The bodies of the three elders burned as they got rained on by the molten iron. Their corpses fell from the sky along with the debris of Great White Mountain, and even the disciples of Great White Sword Sect were deeply buried. The founding master of Great White Sword Sect should have never chosen to found his sect in that place. At that moment, Dragon-rearing Sovereign's body was dozens of times larger than before, like a huge coiling dragon with solid muscles. Under his claws were two huge dragons which carried him as fast as lightning in the direction of Qin Mu. However, there were no signs of the youth in the sky. There were still a few flood dragons hanging on the god's ears, and they crawled into his clothes to hide their heads. Those flood dragons were left behind because they had assisted him in refining the dragon nest. Only due to that was he able to refine the dragon nest at such a fast speed. Dragon-rearing Sovereign's flames torrent into the sky as he looked around, but he still couldn't spot Qin Mu. Flipping his palm over, he took out a jade artifact that was as big as a table. He sneered and said, "Little thing, do you think you can run?" The base of the jade artifact was like a huge round table which had been sliced smoothly. However, on the top of the table, there was a semicircular domed roof. Under it, the surface was separated into 9 levels. Each level had numerous jade pillars and jade canine teeth that seemed to be intertwined. On the 9th level, there was a ring-shaped notch that had a gap. This was none other than the dragon nest of the true Dragon Lord. When Qin Mu had come to the dragon nest, most of its parts had been submerged in the scalding magma. What was revealed in front of their eyes was merely the tip of the iceberg. Dragon-rearing Sovereign had exhausted quite a huge amount of strength to dig out the dragon nest and refine it so that he could bring it away. He then activated the treasure borrowing its borrow to determine Qin Mu's direction. However, the youth seemed to have vanished, and even the dragon nest couldn't sense the true Dragon Lord. Dragon-rearing Sovereign was astonished. He increased his magic power and activated the dragon nest again, but he still couldn't sense where was the Emperor's disc. He has managed to hide the true Dragon Lord? No matter where he hides, it's impossible to block the connection between the true Dragon Lord and the dragon nest. He activated the dragon nest repeatedly, but he still couldn't sense Qin Mu's position. Beads of sweat formed on dragon-rearing sovereign's forehead. Qin Mu had kidnapped over a dozen of his dragons, and they were all extremely powerful. The red flood dragon that the Dragon King had raised was merely a child compared to his own. They had been raised with meticulous care, and the battle prowess of every single one of them was astounding. If they were truly kidnapped by Qin Mu, his losses would not need to be said. In addition, the purpose of his journey was to find the main dragon's vein of eternal peace empire. If it wasn't gotten rid of, how could he still have the face to return to high heavens? Seems like I can only take out my golden dragon cauldron to cast spell to look for my dragons. Dragon-rearing sovereign stretched his hand for his Daotai sack, but found nothing there. His face instantly turned charcoal black. He had handed his Daotai sack to Qin Mu so he could feed the dragons, thus his Daotai sack was naturally in the youth's hands. His golden dragon cauldron was in that Daotai sack. That honest-looking brat, dragon-rearing sovereign's teeth creaked from the grinding, and sparks even jumped from his mouth. If I ever meet another honest-looking person, I will definitely tear them to pieces right away. Do you think I won't be able to find you just because you took away my Daotai sack? You are too naive. Dragon-rearing sovereign raised his hand and pulled out a bunch of hair from his head. Every strand was wavy, not a single one straight. Not only that, his hair even branched out. On every single strand, there were 4 branches which were separated near the 2 centers of the hair. On top of that, when the hair was plucked out from his scalp, the root seemed to give off yawns as though it was a young dragon opening its mouth to breath with sleepy eyes. Dragon-rearing sovereign chanted for a moment, then he opened his palm to blow the hair away. They floated up from his hand and actually came to life, transforming into small dragons as they landed on their feet. They grew in the wind, and in the blink of an eye, they had all transformed into black flood dragons that were 10 yards long. They had slim bodies, thighs, necks, and their forelimbs were all very slender. They sprinted away covering the mountains and the plains. Since you aren't in the sky, you won't be able to run far. Dragon-rearing sovereign's face was flickering between dark and clear. He plucked out another bunch of hair and did the exact same thing again, sending hundreds of slender black flood dragons into the distance. He plucked a few more times, pulling out almost all of the hair on his head before stopping. The speed of several thousand black flood dragons was extremely fast. With each one responsible for a radius of a mile, they quickly formed a search area of several thousand miles wide. The black flood dragons could smell dragons, so no matter how the youth hid the Emperor's disc, it would be useless. As long as there were still flood dragons beside him, even the dragon Chalene, the black flood dragons would be able to smell them and find his traces. No one has ever fooled me like this. Upon finding you, I'll make you suffer a fate worse than death. In Riverside country, Qin Mu looked at the wooden chest, still slightly uneasy. He asked, can dragon-rearing sovereign really not sense anything if Emperor's disc is placed inside here? He refined the dragon nest, and Emperor's disc is the true dragon lord that was nurtured in that place, so it's very strange. Abba. The person carrying the wooden chest was a well-built old man who looked travel-worn. He waved his hands and grinned. There was no tongue in his mouth. Qin Mu nodded and said, I know, how would I dare to doubt Grandpa Mute's abilities? I'm just worried that even if this chest will be able to block off the dragon nest, dragon-rearing sovereign will still find his way over. He is a god of high heavens who raises dragons well, so they are all extremely powerful. When he was escaping earlier, he had encountered a silver boat flying through the sky like a silver shooting star. He immediately shouted for Grandpa Mute, and he saw the silver boat flying back. Sure enough, Mute had been in it. Qin Mu quickly explained everything to him, and Mute put away his flying boat. It transformed into a pile of silver pellets which landed in a wooden chest. He also made Qin Mu put the Emperor's disc inside. Mute said with concern. Grandpa Mute, don't underestimate him. Qin Mu's expression became grim as he felt Mute was slightly underestimating the enemy. That's right, village chief said you went to chase after a ship. What ship was it? Did you manage to catch up to it? I also met a ship and even saw my father on it. The smile on Mute's face vanished and he seemed to become slightly dejected. He carried the wooden chest without a word. Qin Mu immediately followed after him and said, "Grandpa Mute didn't manage to find that ship." Grandpa Mute was still dejected. He signaled that the ship had gone to a world in which he couldn't follow. He was beaten back by the strong practitioners of that world. After a moment, a surprised and delighted voice suddenly sounded out. "Human Emperor Qin, why are you here? Your dragon Qilin is indeed remarkable, to actually run ahead of us." Qin Mu looked toward the source of the voice and was slightly stunned. He saw Wang Muren, Long Yu, and Mu Qingdai sitting on a huge buck, hurrying over while looking travel-worn. The dragon Qilin was pleased and his tail instantly rose straight up like a flagpole. He gave the huge buck of little jade capital a disdainful glance. The huge buck stared with its eyes wide open and its mouth agape. Its little tail that had been sticking straight up immediately fell. With its buck clenching its tail, the huge buck revealed a look of reverence. It then saw the flood dragons of all sizes beside Qin Mu all following the dragon Qilin, and the look of reverence on its face grew even stronger. Qin Mu was astonished. "You guys only came here after 3 days." He had gone from the capital to Great White Sword Sect before crossing 80 or 90,000 miles to the center of great ruins before running back in the same 3 days. However, if he said so, he reckoned that the 3 people wouldn't believe him. Wang Muren and the rest were very puzzled. When Qin Mu rode the dragon Qilin, the creature had obviously run very slowly, so they never expected him to get ahead of them. Could the dragon Qilin, that glutton, have hidden his abilities and only be pretending to be weak? The 3 stepped forward and exchanged greetings. Long Yu looked much better than a few days earlier. He was no longer cracked and his complexion was better. "This is our blacksmith, Grandpa Mute," Qin Mu introduced Mute to everyone. Mute grinned. He handed the wooden chest to Wang Muren, but Qin Mu immediately shouted, "Don't take it." Wang Muren was stunned. He didn't stretch his hands out, and Mute pouted. He babbled and grumbled about Qin Mu not understanding how to respect the elderly. Qin Mu didn't explain, for he knew very well how heavy Mute's chest was. If Wang Muren took it, he would definitely be crushed. If Qin Mu had to choose the most mischievous elder in the village, he would definitely vote for Mute. Even though Cripple had scammed of his hawthorn candies ever since he was young, Cripple was only playing with him and would usually return it back to the tearful him after biting a mouthful or two. Mute was thus the most mischievous in the village, his belly overflowing with evil tricks. From young to old, Qin Mu had been tricked countless times by him. "The battle that happened 2 days ago has stopped, but we are not sure what happened," Wang Muren said. "We were hurrying on our way and could feel the auras of those gods clashing. Based on the direction from where they came, the location should be in the center of Relaxed Prefecture and Bazhu." He took out a map of Eternal Peace Empire and found Relaxed Prefecture and Bazhu. He drew a mark at the spot in the center. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. That was where Granny Sai was staying. The place where those gods fought wasn't far from Granny, so she is probably in danger. His heart was slightly uneasy, but village chief and hermit Qing Yu had gone there first. Their speed was faster and they should have long arrived at the place. "We aren't far from there anymore. There are only about 1,000 miles, so we can reach it in half a day or less," Mu Qingdai said. Qin Mu took out his golden flute and used his vital qi to play it. He said, "There's no need for half a day." A flood dragon's consciousness linked with Qin Mu and it immediately shook its body to transform into a behemoth that was dozens of yards long. Qin Mu jumped on its back and the dragon Qilin came after. "Come on up, we'll take an hour at most to reach there," Qin Mu said. Wang Muren and the rest were bewildered, but they still jumped onto the back of the flood dragon. The buck also came on and looked at the flood dragon suspiciously before looking at the dragon Qilin who was on its back as well. The dragon Qilin looked down his own nose and paid no attention to the disdainful gaze of the buck. Mute also jumped up with his chest, and the flood dragon which had been awe-inspiring moments ago was instantly crushed on the ground. It flailed around like a dead snake, its 4 claws struggling to push it up, digging deep gorges in the ground. But it couldn't get up no matter what. "Grandpa Mute, go down, go down!" Qin Mu immediately shouted out. "You're about to squash it to death." Mute jumped down resentfully and signaled with his hand. Qin Mu's face blushed. Grandpa Mute, why are you scolding me? I'm not being disrespectful to you, it's your chest that's too heavy. Look, you're scolding me again. Wang Muren and the rest looked at each other in dismay. Qin Mu played the golden flute, and over a dozen flood dragons flew over to lift Mute up. Only then was the old man satisfied. The flood dragons were all extremely strong, equivalent to top-notch existences of the cult master level, so their speed was naturally not slow. Everyone hurried forward at an extremely fast speed, the trees in their passing unable to be seen, just flashing past like shadows. Even mountains passed by them quickly. On the back of the dragon, the buck continued to look at the dragon Qilin with stronger and stronger disdain. It couldn't resist giving a loud sneeze which seemed to be scorning the glutton. The dragon Qilin's tail drooped down as he lowered his head to look at his snout. Qin Mu was rather gratified. Fatty dragon still knows shame, so it's not that he can't be taught. I shall feed him fire element divine vitality pill tomorrow, and he shouldn't pick them out this time. Suddenly, a few black-colored slender flood dragons showed up. Some were climbing on treetops and some were flying in the sky. They raised their heads to look at the flood dragons, then the group they were carrying. Qin Mu swept his gaze around, startled. Strange beasts such as flood dragons are extremely low in number, so why are they everywhere now? Mu Qingdai asked in bewilderment. Those black flood dragons flew up and raised their heads to roar, giving off weird sounds like, moha, moha. Everyone looked back and saw a swarm of their kin, some good 1,000 of them flying over. They were a dense mass which covered the whole mountain peak. What happened next was that those thousands of black flood dragons jumped, slithered, and flew over in pursuit of them. Qin Mu turned away from them. For someone to use such an ability, it naturally has to be dragon-rearing sovereign. Most of his flood dragons are with me, so where did these black flood dragons come from? They don't look too real. He opened dragon-rearing sovereign's Dao Tai sack and took out dragon-rearing scripture. After examining it in detail, he saw a sentence which mentioned using dragon chi to nourish one's body. Absorb the dragon chi, refine body into that of a dragon, then circulate the technique to transform. Muscles, hair and skin, there's nothing that can't be transformed. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. He turned back to look at the black flood dragons that were chasing after them frantically. In that case, these black flood dragons should be part of dragon-rearing sovereign, and since there's such a large number of them, it can only be his hair. As expected of the gods of high heavens, able to even refine one's hair into dragons. Since they are hair, they must be scared of fire. Qin Mu blinked, and the sound of the flute slightly changed. One of the fire dragons carrying Mute slowed down and suddenly lowered its body as it went into the forest below. Qin Mu controlled the other dragons to hurry on their way while the densely packed black flood dragons chased after frantically like a piece of huge black cloud. When the black cloud flew above the fire flood dragon, terrifying true fire swept up from below and instantly covered the radius of several dozens of miles. Countless black flood dragons squirmed as they burned in the true fire. Thick black smoke billowed in the sky, and not long later, the creatures that were dragon-rearing sovereign's hair were completely incinerated. After the fire flood dragon burned all of the black flood dragons, it quickly chased after the group while nodding and wagging its tail. It soon caught up to them and continued to carry the elderly. Mute revealed a look of admiration and gave Qin Mu a thumbs up. The youth smiled bashfully and waved his hand. Grandpa Mute, don't praise me like this. Wang Muren, Mu Qingdai, and Long Yu stared with their eyes wide open at the thousands of black flood dragons that had been reduced to ashes. Every one of them shuddered. Muren, you are a good child, leave the human emperor, Long Yu said secretly. This person is too demonic. Wang Muren hesitated. Big senior brother, when you were crazy, he and I already formed an alliance and founded Heaven Alliance. I'm one of the 4 great leaders there, so the 2 of us are on the same ship as of now. Long Yu stared with his eyes wide open and sighed after a while. You will be brought astray by him. After a moment, dragon-rearing sovereign finally came to the place where Qin Mu had burned his black flood dragons, and his face went black when he saw the ashes that filled the mountain. He was so angry that his hands trembled uncontrollably. Honest-looking brat, honest-looking brat. There were only a few strands of curly hair left of his head, and they seemed to come to life on their own as they started shivering from fear. I will definitely not let you off. Even if you go up to heaven or down to hell, I will find you. I will mince your corpse. I will chop you into fine pieces. He plucked out the remaining strands of hair which squirmed in his hand as they struggled to go back into his scalp. It was obvious that the end of their comrades had made them afraid. With a black face, dragon-rearing sovereign blew a breath of dragon chi to transform the strands of hair. They took the shapes of black dragons and sniffed their surroundings. They could smell the scent left behind by the other flood dragons, but they didn't dare to give chase. What's the use of having you guys? Dragon-rearing sovereign was furious. He shook his head, and the black flood dragons transformed back into hair and returned to his scalp. Dragon-rearing sovereign sliced his wrist and spilled some fresh blood. The droplets instantly transformed into blood flood dragons to continue searching for Qin Mu's trail. In front is the place where Granny lives in seclusion. Qin Mu stopped playing his flute and looked ahead. At the sight, he couldn't help being stunned. Granny Sai stayed under the foothill that was in the center of Baosu and Relax Prefecture. Beside the house, there was a clear lake, and it was a very serene place. However, the surroundings were barren and desolate. Because Li Qianqing liked to come out and play around, Granny chose a place that was far from the worldly affairs. However, what appeared in front of Qin Mu and the rest's eyes wasn't a wild and mountainous land. Instead, it was an incomparably luxurious community of palaces that were constructed from gold and jade. The celestial palaces situated near one after another transformed the once wild and mountainous land into a sacred ground for immortals. There were marble pillars carved with dragons and phoenixes, smooth white jade that was laid out on the floor, and incomparably thick golden pillars holding up the roofs that had extraordinary style. The mountains in the surroundings had also went through a transformation. There were strange rocks and weird pines, spirit grass that spread throughout the land, brightly colored flowers, and all kinds of strange and weird strange beasts as well as flying creatures loitering around. Gardens of all sizes were everywhere, and they had spirit herbs that even Qin Mu didn't recognize. Spirit springs, flying waterfalls, crooked footpaths, streams, and brooks also helped to construct the beauty of mountains and rivers that could usually only be seen in ink paintings. Even though everyone in the group was from reputable and big sects and were used to seeing luxury, walking into such a sacred ground still made them feel slightly wretched. They were afraid of dirtying the floor and spoiling the arrangements. Newt revealed a look of suspicion and signaled twice. Qin Mu said in a daze, "I also don't know. It wasn't like this when I was here last." "Granny! Granny!" He called out twice, but no one replied. Only a few huge fish leaped out of the water, transforming in beautiful women who had human upper bodies and fish lower bodies. They leaned against the fake mountains and sang a soothing song with their charming and gentle voices. Newt gave 2 ahs and Qin Mu nodded. It's indeed too luxurious. I also don't know how Granny managed to get all of it. They came to a divine hall whose decorations were simply too exquisite. After entering, they immediately walked out in fear of dirtying the place. Newt walked a couple more steps, then placed down his wooden chest. "Granny isn't here," Qin Mu said to Wang Muren and the rest in bewilderment. "Granny must have left home, so let's just wait here for a moment. If Granny doesn't come back before the sky turns dark, we'll have to leave immediately. We can't stay for even 1 minute. When the sky turns dark, it's definitely not Granny that would come back. It would be the old demon." This video will end here.